All right, and then give it up for Tone. This is his 4th/3rd Unconfiscatable.
Third. 4th year, 3rd conference. COVID got in the way.
And for, I know Tone on a very personal level, and what he does is he consistently puts out content for people. And it's not easy, you guys. And I know he doesn't necessarily make money directly off of it. So if you can super chat, tip him, you should. Right, Tone? He's not going to promote himself. Okay, perfect. So this next topic is Bitcoin, a look into the future. Today, we're looking at the price of Bitcoin, and it's about $39,000, and the market cap is about $751 billion. Now, we think about Bitcoin is a commodity, and we think about the entire world in terms of, let's say, its market cap. Let's look at Apple alone, right? Apple, I think, is at 2.6 or 7 trillion dollars as a market cap. Apple is one company. It provides phones and computers, but it still is one company. $751 billion in comparison to $2.6 trillion. What does that mean in terms of price appreciation? It's incredible, and it's there, right? Now, me personally, my name's Erica Juma. I'm pretty well known in the city of Miami for being the first person to host large-scale events in the city, really interested in onboarding the local government. And this is really what I want to drive home before I introduce our panel, is that everybody has a talent of their own. For some people, it is development. For some of you guys, you can sit behind a computer screen for hours. For some of you guys, it's talking. It's building your local communities. And even though this is a decentralized world, it's important for us to still feed our local communities, because when shit hits the fan, which it already is, right? We have to make sure that the people around us, we have been educating and working on. So it's important to know your neighbor and to make sure that they also earn Bitcoin to strengthen your local economy. So, for us in Miami, it was like attracting local politicians. So if that's something that's, fuck the state, right? Thank you, okay. But on a local level, there's still change to be made. So I really encourage everybody to try and do that on a local level. But not only that, I really hope that this panel gives you guys insight, because the future, we don't know the future, but we can build the future. We all have the power to create the future for ourselves. And everybody here, you're in the right place because you're learning about this technology that is going to shape the future. And also, you have the ability to, just really change things. So without further ado, I'm going to invite my 2 panelists up. And the first one is Tone, you guys. Tone is obviously his conference.
Hey, guys. I'm going to slide this over a little bit.
For me? Okay. And the next one is Giacomo. I think today, what do you identify as?
Giacomo.
A purple cat? Is that what it is?
Dog.
Dog, okay. Okay, so we're going to bring a lot of action items to you in this panel. I really want to get into your guys' brains. And I'm going to separate this into 3 separate sections. The first one is a little bit of background so we can understand the bias that you have because of your background and what you've experienced in the past. Some current events. There's a lot of really interesting current events that are basically marketing tools for Bitcoin. And the last one is going to be suggestions and advice on some of your favorite Bitcoin companies. We'll talk about places to move, this economic concept of voting with your feet, being able to live where you like the laws. Where do you suggest that people should move to? Because, what's interesting is that Bitcoin does provide financial freedom, but what about personal freedom when you live in a place that is restricting you, right? So first thing, Tone, I'm going to ask the question to you. You grew up in Russia?
Yes.
Okay, so give us a little bit about your background, where you grew up, and any parallels you see today between Russia and where you live now in the U.S.
Yeah, the word Russia has taken on a very different meaning. I think we did a good job not making this event political, even though my channel has been steering in that direction. So, man, a lot has changed. In my lifetime. I'm thinking I still have half my lifetime to go, and a lot more is going to change. It was weird, looking back at it, things are so different. Like when I was a kid in the Soviet Union, you don't feel the communism. You don't feel the fact that you don't own anything. There's no ownership, really. And when you have to leave the country, when we finally got permission to leave the country, Australians, I think, are still working on that, but we eventually got permission to leave the Soviet Union. And when we did that, we were only allowed to leave with $100 per family member. something around that amount. I mean, $100 per family member bought you a lot more in the late 80s than now, which is like the three ways government confiscates your money, right? Inflation, taxation, or they just take it. And we're seeing all three right now, like exponentially increasing. And coming to America, yeah, it's great. You now have ownership. You came to capitalism. But 5 or 6 years in middle school plus high school, then 7 years liberal college's education, and suddenly, you're again on that socialist communist mindset until you kind of grow out of it. And now Bitcoin is changing that completely.
So state-run education, very similar to what we're seeing now. Public schools are definitely the norm. And then also this ability for bank accounts to be shut down. Now, Giacomo has a different story because you grew up in Switzerland, correct?
Not really, in Italy.
But you live in Switzerland now.
I live in Switzerland right now.
All right,
yeah.
They both have their own issues, especially if you guys saw the recent news about Switzerland, and we'll talk about that. But how about you growing up? What was that like? And any biases that brought you onto Bitcoin?
So I grew up in Italy, which, for example, recently during this Coro-Nazi situation the last 2 years was even worse than Canada or Australia. I mean, in Italy, you literally had helicopters chasing down people running alone on the streets. You had people basically, a young guy, 17, being dragged by policemen with narcotics and brought away from school because he refused to wear a mask inside the school. So with policemen kidnapping a guy, police entering university in Venice to bring out a girl protesting the mandates. The difference with Canada is that in Italy nobody cares, so there's no struggle to report. So in Canada you have the trackers and you have the confiscation of the track. In Italy nobody cares. They just go along with any kind of dictatorship they have as a traditional habit. So I think it's just national custom to just go along with the dictatorship. So in Italy it was like Italy had I was not in the Soviet Union, so I was in the country of the country west of the Yalta line with the biggest communist party in the history of mankind. So Italy is like the culture of learning how to get along with the communist regime in a soft way, trying to escape that. So when I finished my university, I started to work as an entrepreneur after a few years as an employee. I started to see on my skin the 78% total tax rate, tax pressure, 78% on an average including the social, the social security part. And so I moved to Switzerland, which for me was really the land of the free. Switzerland was a place of political decentralization, like financial privacy, sound money also. Like Switzerland was the last country to abandon the gold standard. So it was a very conservative country. And just about when I started to move, Switzerland decided to turn into basically Italy 2.0. So I'm considering that maybe I'm the problem, and I'm being very, very cautious about my next moves. But it's still better than Italy, but not as good as.
Don't mess up El Salvador.
Exactly.
Please, oh my God. So you guys are both early Bitcoiners. Could you summarize to the audience what idea made it click for you? Because everybody has a different moment where they're like, wow, this stuff is very important.
This one.
Favorite?
Yeah, it happened in 2013 with the Cyprus banking confiscation. It was right there. Unconfiscatability.
For me, just like in the presentation I gave yesterday, it's a fortunate coincidence you asked that. That was the click for me. The fact that it was unifying my interests that were previously completely disconnected. So the week I started to learn about Bitcoin, it was November 2012, and in the same week I was part of this pro-Assange, very like a little bit left-leaning model libertarian group, very pro-privacy, pro-darknet markets, and these guys were actually starting to discuss Bitcoin as black market money. Other guys from the Italian Mises Institute, so Austrian guys, all about gold and monetary policy, no overlap with the other guys. These one were like all the conservative gold bucks, completely different. They told me about Bitcoin the same week. And then I was working at Accenture as a payment technology consultant, and some colleagues started to discuss Bitcoin as a new technology. And so I started to really hear Bitcoin from three completely different, separated parts of my life. And up to that point, my life was being an activist in one group that was despising the other group, and the other way around, and also go to work with this boring stuff about payments, nothing to do with my ethical involvement in advocacy groups. And so for the first time, there was one unifying thread, and that was the click for me.
Yeah, serendipity is very important in a lot of things that I feel like how I live my life as well. You know, I learned about Bitcoin because I campaigned for Ron Paul for his 2012 campaign, and it was because you were around that freedom-minded individuals, and you were like, wow, maybe I don't technically understand this technology, but knowing that the leaders who see the free world in the way that I see it, they agree with this was really that encouragement. So don't feel like you have to understand everything technically in order to take this step forward. And now it's like, you know, all the big banks are getting onboarded, which leads me to our next topic of current events, okay? So in 2020, the Office of the Comptroller of Currency, OCC, said that banks can now custody Bitcoin. One of the big banks that came on board to custody Bitcoin was BNY Mellon, the oldest bank in the United States. I think they manage like $41 trillion, and they're now custodying Bitcoin for their clients. In terms of the future of Bitcoin, how do you guys see this interacting? I mean, there was an argument early on stage where Bitcoin is already a store of value. It's proven that its use case as a store of value is very, very good. But do we see Bitcoin becoming a currency like it was originally supposed to? Or should it become legal tender? Do we want it to become legal tender? What do you guys think?
So Bitcoin already is a store of value and a medium of exchange and a unit of account even. It's just not equally distributed. For example, it's a store of value in many cases for many people just because it's unconfiscatable and it's unprintable, and so it's good for inflation, it's good for taxation, it's good for confiscation, which are the problems right now for everybody, including first world people. While it's a medium of exchange, but it's that only for a subset of people that really need that. For example, if you can pay with fiat, usually because of Gresham law, you pay with fiat. It's like if you're in Venezuela and you can pay with bolivar instead of dollar, you just thesaurize the dollar and you pay with shitty bolivars. And you do the same now. I pay with fiat if I can. I tend not to spend Bitcoin, but there are a few transactions that you cannot do with fiat, and that's the whole point. If you want to pay over the internet with privacy, you want to pay a VPN and you don't want to give up your credit card name, then you need Bitcoin. If you want to pay some developer in India and you don't want to go through some Swift super expensive and super slow stuff, you have to pay with Bitcoin. If you want to buy something that your government doesn't want you to buy, which could be a Bible in some Middle East country or some substance or somewhere, I don't know, you need Bitcoin. Right now, even if you really want to just do something which is not political mainstream and you get your payment rate censored, you need Bitcoin as a medium of payment, as a medium of exchange. And then Bitcoin is also actually a unit of account, because if you think about that, the correlation between all the shitcoin market and Bitcoin is so strong that it doesn't make sense for a good trader to price a shitcoin in US dollar terms. You have to know what is the opportunity cost for your non-Bitcoin hodling. So what you do is you measure your shitcoin trading performances mostly in Bitcoin. So it is a unit of account too. It's just that these three functions are not really coming into being at the same time. For example, in order to be a medium of exchange, you need also to be a store of value first, because medium of exchange means that medium of exchange is not any object that you can exchange. It's some object that you will exchange and the counterparty will keep it until it will be able to exchange it with another good or service later on. So it's a delayed exchange, and so you need to be a store of value first. And then in order to be a unit of account, you need liquidity, and so you need to be a medium of exchange. So they will take time, but we're getting there.
I'll make mine quick. I'm not a huge fan of regulation that allows bank to custody Bitcoin for people, because it makes people lazy and they will let banks hold their Bitcoin, which is slightly better than the traditional system. At least the money that the banks are holding for them is not going to devalue. But it's like banks holding your gold. It's still confiscatable, and if the government wants it, they'll take it. So that's the issue.
So for the legal tender question, it's legal tender in El Salvador. I think there's one county in Switzerland that said it could become legal tender. In the United States, do you want Bitcoin to become legal tender?
That's a really hard question. I've gone back and forth on that question a couple of times.
So no answer yet.
I can make an argument for and against. I'm very happy that El Salvador did this because it brought up the conversation. Would I have rather seen El Salvador just start buying up Bitcoin the way Michael Saylor has and not officially make it legal tender? Like, I don't believe that there needs a law. They can just say, we don't care. Like, you can use Bitcoin. You don't have to use Bitcoin. You're not going to be criminally charged. We're treating Bitcoin like a currency, so you're not going to get taxed on it. You're not going to get taxed on Bitcoin, holding Bitcoin, having it go up in value. So it's just there. Like, you don't need a law for or against. It's just there.
Yeah, let's try to break down the concept of legal tender in its constituencies, which is basically three parts. One part is legal tender is when your government accepts that kind of money, that kind of currency for taxes or fines or anything else, and not others. So they create a pressure, they create an artificial demand, because that's what in order to pay taxes to the US government, you need to buy dollar first. So it creates a demand. And this kind of legal tender with Bitcoin is cool. I mean, if like right now in Switzerland, the city of Lugano officially accept Bitcoin for any kind of payment for taxes, fines, or town council services, that's fine. I mean, it's just a criminal organization accepting Bitcoin. I mean, it's okay. It's adoption, right? I don't care if I don't like governments. Like I don't like Cosa Nostra or Camorra or the Chinese triads, but if Cosa Nostra starts to accept Bitcoin, that's kind of adoption. I mean, criminals use oxygen to breathe. That's not a problem for oxygens, right? If it's useful, good people will use it and bad people will use it. The second kind of legal tender is the government forces people to only accept that, or better, they prevent people with violence from refusing that currency as a payment. This is not a good thing. I'm against this kind of legal tender. The only reason I'm not that against in the El Salvador case is that it's fake. Like, if you read the law says everybody's forced to accept Bitcoin if the payer wants to pay in Bitcoin, which almost never happens, and if the guy who accepts Bitcoin is not like impossibilitated because of like lack of infrastructure, which is almost always the case. And if they have infrastructure and the buyer wants to pay in Bitcoin, they can still convert in US dollar immediately using the government infrastructure. So it's a fake legal tender, mostly a marketing move, which is okay. In Switzerland, it's kind of the same. The city of Lugano cannot impose a real legal tender, so they're trying bilateral agreements with the merchants to convince the merchant to accept. This is a good kind of legal tender. It's not really forcing anybody.
Yeah,
and the third one, and I close very quick, the third one is actually implicit form of legal tender, which is monopoly, basically. They prevent you from using alternatives, which is not the case in this moment. They are not preventing people, like it's not like El Salvador is preventing people from using, exactly.
Yeah, and that's that thing, is that government is this monopoly on force, and they use violence to get compliance. And this is what we love about Bitcoin, is that there is no violence involved. It is an option, just like in El Salvador. Now, one thing that's happened recently in the news is that the EU said that banks are supposed to shut down access to Russian accounts. Now, Switzerland, which is historically known for being neutral, historically known for being the privacy standard for banking, they now made it. And they took that EU regulation a step further, and they now took away people's cryptocurrency accounts that were banking their cryptocurrency in Switzerland. Now, this is in contrast to Coinbase, Binance, Kraken saying, we're not going to shut down accounts to Russia. And for me, I mean, I love that. That's the mindset of our people, right? I might not agree with you, but I'm not God. I don't get to choose what's right or wrong. This is what this technology was made for. Now, given these on-ramp and off-ramp obstacles, what effect do you feel like this has on the future of Bitcoin? And do you guys have suggestions on certain ways that people can obtain Bitcoin without having to touch these on-ramps and off-ramps that do have control?
All right. So I know you're from Switzerland, but I really want to go first on this one. I think this will affect Switzerland a lot more than it's going to affect Bitcoin. I'm still trying to figure out how Switzerland managed to stay neutral and bank everyone throughout the entire World War II. But Facebook and Twitter pressure basically, and probably the US, has made them change everything. Like, you're going to tell me that the World War II situation for 6 years was not as bad as what happened here? So I think it just says a lot more about Switzerland. And Switzerland's going to be in trouble because they really don't understand how they managed to, not get invaded during World War II. And yeah, it's crazy. It's the same thing when they gave up the Swiss numbered accounts. But yeah, I have to stand with Kraken and other companies on this. I mean, this is what. At this point, if the world could cut Russia off from the internet, they would try right now. And we'll see how it goes. But I'm curious what your thoughts on this is.
No, I agree. I mean, when Binance is more censorship resistant than you, when Binance is more Switzerland than Switzerland, you have a problem, Switzerland. So I think that, when you first submit to blackmail, think about somebody blackmailing you. You give them money the first time, and then there's no way to stop him, basically. It's very unlikely that at a certain point you will say enough is enough. If you bend your knees first, then you will just keep going. And that's what happened with Switzerland. They bend the knee with the US. The US put this kind of embargo, commercial embargo on them to end the bank secrecy for US citizens. And they just bent the knee, and now there is no new, there is no threshold, there is no line in the sand, there is no place to stop. They will keep submitting and submitting and surrendering and surrendering and complying and complying. They seem to be resistant to the Coronazi situation at the beginning of 2020, and they basically imposed an even stricter Coronazi rule in 2021. Now they lifted it magically, top down, which is also very bad for Switzerland. Switzerland was used to be something very bottom up, with a very local form of government, with a very decentralized form of power. All the Coronazi situation, all the COVID restriction came centrally from Bern and disappeared last week centrally from Bern. So it's very centralized right now. It's very non-neutral right now, and I don't think it's getting better. One encouraging signal is that, just like we have seen in Lugano, is that if the central government of Switzerland is going to destroy Switzerland neutrality and Switzerland decentralization and Switzerland law for privacy and some money, maybe some local constituencies like cities and cantons may start to make Switzerland great again. That said, if they fail, as Tom said, Switzerland needs Bitcoin, not the other way around. Bitcoin is the new Switzerland. So,
yeah, and it also shows how the world's always changing. Like, yes, US is a superpower right now. It's not going to stay that way for another 100 years. And Switzerland was known for this. They won't be anymore. It might be El Salvador. Who knows, right? But the world will always change. This is why we never had a one-world government.
And hopefully we can give you guys some tips on where those places are that are going to become the next G7 countries. But just in terms of, just very directly, any companies, any places you can send people to get Bitcoin on ramps that are not having to subject you to KYC AML.
Well, one is a sponsor here. It's Azteco. It's great. You go with cash in a place, you buy a voucher, and then you buy Bitcoin over the internet. No KYC, nothing. There are some low, let's say, like light KYC platform, right, like Relay or Bitpocket in Switzerland. You pay with a bank account. You don't have to KYC, but you leave traces of your bank account name. So it's a lower level of risk, but still a risk for privacy. So a similar situation with Hodl is an exchange which is non-custodial, so you can buy without KYC.
Yeah, Hodl.
Yeah.
Sorry, he has an accent, so I gotta translate for you guys.
Thank you for translating.
Yeah, by the way, speaking of Azteco, there's literally money on the floor, right? So there are Azteco envelopes under every seat. So if you haven't gotten one
that's
yet,
not
I missed it.
Yeah, take
Keep
a couple,
one
guys.
for me, please.
Please. And then there's also BISC, B-I-S-Q.
Yeah, BISQ is even better because there is no central platform. The only problem is that it's not great for noobs, because in order to buy on BISQ,
Complicated.
you need to have Bitcoin first
And then I would say that the easiest way is to mine Bitcoin. You get Bitcoin that are clean, and you get it in I would say, slightly different way.
Well, look, eventually, once you start using Bitcoin, you're not going back. I mean, maybe Mike Hearn. There's very few examples. Maybe Roger Ver. Like, once you get on Bitcoin, you're staying there. So as more and more people get on, more and more people are going to pay in Bitcoin. More people are going to want to accept Bitcoin. It'll still spread
when you go orange, you never go back.
Yeah, exactly. It'll still spread.
So talking about current events again, everybody here is politically cognizant, and that's what I really love about the crypto community. So we all know what happened in Canada with the truckers. People donated to a decentralized, people donate to a centralized crowdfunding platform. That list was leaked. That list was so leaked, I have that list of people that donated to this platform, right? Now, what happened is that those people who were Canadians, they got their bank accounts shut down. Now, what do we think about encouraging people to send crypto to war-torn countries? I mean, is this the correct way to go about it? Are we getting scrutiny by governments because of this? And also, like, what happens to those UTXOs when Bitcoin is sent to that wallet? And then the thing is, too, is like with Ukraine, I think donations to Ukraine hit an all-time high. Like, how do we know that that money is even going to Ukraine? So I guess the overarching question is, what is your sentiment for people sending money to war-torn countries? And is that also traceable?
So the first question is very difficult to answer because it depends. I mean, how do you know that the money will be used for the declared purposes? You don't know. You have to know people. Bitcoin doesn't fix that. Doesn't at all. You have to know people you are sending money to. You have to verify somehow. So that remains difficult. About traceability, though, it's different. We like to use simple black and white on and off memes like Bitcoin is unconfiscatable because it is untraceable. Of course, reality is all about cost of attacking. The reality is that you can trace Bitcoin even if you use any kind of technology, of privacy technology. If you put confidential transaction and zero knowledge proof, still, if the government has a camera on your face and your keyboard and your screen 24 hours a day, like in Orwell, there's no privacy because even if you use Bitcoin with a great technology, they just track you. If they read your mind, there is no privacy. So the point is making spying on you more expensive. So is it possible for a government to target an individual and to try hard to de-anonymize him using different kind of techniques from backdoor to spyware? Yes, it is. Is it possible for the government to trivially track everybody with very low cost like they will do with the banking system? No, it's not. If you pay with if you donate with Bitcoin, your name is not there unless you put it on the donation form. But otherwise, your name is not there. They can try to trace you if you don't use best technology practices like CoinJoin and coin control and avoiding KYC. But even that is very expensive because they have to target you. And if you do use the best practices, then it's still possible to go all Assange or go all Snowden on you with the NSA satellite looking at your fingers on a keyboard. Sure, but that's very expensive. It's like, is Bitcoin confiscatable? Well, it depends. If you get to Guantanamo and get tortured for 10 years, maybe you will reveal your private keys. Okay, but that's a bit expensive to do on 7 billion people. So not that they will not want to, but they cannot do the from a cost opportunity point of view. So I would say if you donate with Bitcoin, your privacy is safe in prima facie, unless you get targeted, and then you need and the better you manage your privacy, like with CoinJoin and Coin Control, and avoiding KYC whenever you can, the better for you.
So he's brought up Assange twice, which is a really reason why one of my main functions of business exists. Because one thing that happened with Assange is when Assange got picked up at the airport, it was because they pulled his passport. If he had another passport, he would be fine right now. He would be probably hiding in some country, right? But because he only had one passport, they were able to restrict him from leaving the country. Now, Bitcoin does provide financial sovereignty, but what about physical sovereignty? I think this is very important because you can have all the Bitcoin stored safely in the world, but if they pick you up for whatever reason, the government is a monopoly on force, then we don't have any protections. So Tone, I know you know about this topic as well, but what do you think about places people should move, second citizenship, citizen by investment, residencies, places people should be looking for
a lot
freedom?
of it is changing. I would look at countries that had the least amount of COVID restrictions. That's
Tanzania.
basically my list. It's a short list. Or countries that had, even they kind of went bad, but then they did a full 180. So even a place like the UAE and Dubai, they had a strict lockdown for like a few months, and they're like, this is insane. And they stopped. The UK took them a little longer. It was insanity for like almost a year, and then they're like, okay, that's it, done. Mexico never really had it. So you want to look at those. El Salvador, same thing. Never really had anything major, and then they went, that's it, done. And then there are places like Hong Kong and Singapore that I think they'll be locked down for a decade. Australia will eventually open up, maybe. I don't know. So that would be my list. And it's not about having a bunch of passports. My view on it is a little bit different. You want to have just 1 or 2 passports, not 8. Because if you have 8 passports, you're now subject to 8 sets of laws that apply to you all over the world at the same time. So you are really breaking the law all the time in one of your passports. So my view is you try to establish as many residencies as you can. And once you maintain those residencies long enough, it's an option. It's like a call option. You can call it into a passport eventually. So have maybe 1 or 2, maybe more than 1. Have 2 or 3 passports, and try to get like 8 residencies in other places where you can just live and convert them into a passport if you need it.
Well, I absolutely agree with Ton. I will just make it. I would just differ on one opinion. I think you have to match the new tendency to totalitarianism from COVID with the old previous one. For example, like Belarus is a country that was perfect for COVID restriction. No COVID restriction at all for 2 years. Yet they will not hit you because you go to protest against Trudeau, but they will hit you anyway if you go to protest against Lukashenko. So they didn't need a new excuse to become aggressive because they already were. So probably you have to balance. There is the very bad thing is that the list of countries not terrible about coronazism is not overlapping with the list of countries that were not terrible before. So I will never move to Sweden. I mean, Sweden was known to be a socialist hell with huge taxation. And now Sweden was the best in Europe for coronazism. So it's complicated. One last thing that I will add is that you should read a very old book which is pre-Bitcoin but very prophetic about Bitcoin, which is The Sovereign Individuals, that started this kind of idea of again, voting with your feet, as you were mentioning. And there are several ideas following this idea of moving around to shop, to do citizen shopping or residency shopping. One thing that these people started to theorize is the 7 flag theory. So you should have this passport.
I thought it was 5.
5, right.
Well, it's 4 now.
4
Bitcoin took off a flag, remember?
Right, yeah, exactly.
Banking,
that was my point.
no longer needed. 4 flags now.
You made my point. You don't need to care for banking anymore. You just need to care for everything else. You still have to care for everything else, but Bitcoin fixed 1 flag.
And I think that the countries we should really be looking...
I'm sorry. Are you saying that the metaverse is not going to fix another flag?
Who's plugging into Neuralink and sucking their body into the Matrix? Not me. Okay, so in terms of the countries if you can't leave the United States, obviously I'm a huge proponent for Miami, right? I need more people there who are not, who are freedom-minded. So if you guys want to stay in the U.S., Miami, Florida is doing very well, and we want to make sure that that local community there is of people who are of the like mind. And then you look at like the different regions of Florida, and what the people in power are doing there is really meant to keep Florida as a free state. Now, in terms of internationally, obviously El Salvador, they're building a citizenship by investment program in Bitcoin that they're accepting. And then South America, it's not too far, but the laws there are really turning to be beneficial. Now,
South America and Africa I believe, will be the future.
Yes. So G7 countries, the next G7 countries in this next era of the world, where do you think they are?
Well, yeah, I will agree. Africa and South America, Eastern Europe is interesting because one criteria is to go in a place where laws are good, but another is to go in places where laws are very bad and nobody cares and nobody enforces them, which is also very interesting because it's more anti-fragile. So if you go in a place where like, for example, there are
like Mexico.
Yeah, like Mexico or like Serbia or like Albania, Croatia. There are some like Eastern European,
where the government doesn't have enough money to have this very strong monopoly on
and
force.
Also the culture is ex-Soviet cultures are immune to government propagandas. Like if you grow up in Serbia, you know that the government is lying, but as default, so you don't really care. And enforcement is very difficult, and that's better because, for example, there have been moments in which. In Switzerland, situation was worse than in Italy because in Italy, laws were very bad, but they have many places not complying. In Switzerland, laws were better, but everybody was complying like a fucking sheep. So it was very difficult to find a non-compliance island. So Africa, I think Africa is great. I mean, I struggle to imagine somebody really following laws in Africa. It's great.
I mean, I always bring up the example that there's a lot of places in the world that never put down telephone lines. And then they just immediately skipped a generation of technology and they went straight to cell phones because they didn't have the infrastructure to do so. And so looking for countries that fit that mandate is very important. Okay, so I have 2 rapid fire questions, so answer very quickly. I know you guys have big brains, so there's a lot to talk about. And then I have one more question just to leave everybody on a note of what can we do personally, because this is a decentralized movement where the individual does really matter. Okay, so first question, how low does Bitcoin go to remain bullish?
I'm not a technical analyst like Tone. I don't understand numbers, but instinctively, if the low of this cycle is higher than the high of the last cycle, I think we're fine, because what that means, like a rule of thumb, is that the money entered the previous cycle, learned the lesson, and is not going to get scared by this the bearish moment. So if Bitcoin stays above not 20,000, but the equivalent of 20,000 at current purchasing power, which I guess would be around, I don't know, 27,000, I think it would be fine.
Yeah, my target is actually even lower than that. As long as Bitcoin doesn't spend more than a week below 20,000, I think everything is just fine.
Do Cme Gaps matter? Because there's one at like 17
I don't
and
think,
one at like 8.
I don't think they matter at all.
Okay. The next question is favorite projects in Bitcoin you think everyone here should take a look at and need a little bit more they need more highlighting on.
So there is some effort to do easy libraries to do Bitcoin multisig in a good way that could be used for inheritances and stuff like that. Chiara this morning told you about these 2 or 3 multisig and stuff like that. This is already possible right now, but there are even more possibilities, like having an account which is 3 of 3, so very secure, but it becomes 2 of 3 after 5 years, and it becomes 1 of 3 after 10 years. So you can use it for inheritances and stuff like that. Bitcoin can already do that from a protocol point of view, but doing that in a streamlined and a very secure way with standards, it requires libraries, best practices, and tutorials and interfaces. So it will take time, and BDK library is great for that, and stuff that companies like Spectre and Sparrow and Nunchuck are doing are very, very important.
Yeah.
And the second,
Oh no, we're real low on time.
Okay.
Real quick, name a company. that you were gonna say?
Spectre, Sparrow, Nunchuck.
Yeah, let's also
Well,
follow
I'm gonna-
Wasabi and Sparrow. And
Right. Well, other than our amazing sponsors, check out what they do. I've never even used it, but I always push Liquid, the Liquid sidechain, because one of the reasons why shitcoins like Ethereum, like Binance Smart Chain, like OpenSea, why these things are so powerful, are because people keep building their garbage on top of them. But you can build that garbage on top of Bitcoin. And that would really suck a lot of value out of them. So Liquid sidechain, RGB, the Bitcoin sidechains, and if you really need to launch that token, I mean, at least do it on Bitcoin. At least your technology will be silent, so we can only argue the merits of your project, not the tech of your project.